Hi, I'm Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge, and in this video I'm going to share 3 strategies that you can use with your isolated clients to help them feel less lonely. Now, this is a very approximate version of my online article, and if you want to receive that into your inbox, then you can click the link below. Now, a client I'll call Derek came along and he complained of being very isolated and that he just couldn't connect with other people. He had moved to the area maybe 6 years ago, and he was finding that he just couldn't make friends or any lasting connections. But he had tried. He'd joined a local sea swimming group who met every single morning and swam in the ocean. But he felt that everybody already knew each other, that there were sort of cliques, and that he just couldn't break through. But he also felt that in some ways he was putting other people off. And that was understanding how that was happening was key for our work together. Now, I've written before about how to help lonely clients, but I just want to give you 3 more ideas here that may well help you help your clients overcome barriers to forming relationships and friendships. So I think it's really important. Now, the word epidemic is often overused. We hear there's an epidemic of everything. It's an epidemic of saying epidemic. But where loneliness is concerned, there really does seem to be a huge increase in people complaining and suffering from loneliness. In 2022, the British Medical Journal published the results of a meta-analysis of 27 separate studies of loneliness in 113 countries, and it found that a high percentage of people across all these countries experienced a serious level of loneliness. Back in 2018, another study appearing in The Lancet determined that a whopping 1/3 of people in industrialized countries experience loneliness, with 1 in 12 feeling lonely at very damaging levels. But what about the actual experience of loneliness? On an individual level, loneliness can suck the meaning out of life. And it really does seem that relationships, friendships, connection, shared experience does seem to be what makes us happy. Sure, some material wealth contributes to well-being. There's no doubt about that. But it's really the friendships, the relationships we form, the fun we have together that makes life feel worthwhile. Derek had been lonely for years, and he had no family living nearby. But the family that he did have were, by his estimation, not great communicators anyway, so they never got in touch with him and they weren't very forthcoming. What's more, while online communities can be a way of meeting some of our needs for connection and human attention, nothing can really replace actual face-to-face encounters. It's been found that strong in-person social networks are associated with lower rates of depression, anxiety, and even dementia. And other research found that online socializing without actually meeting up with people may even increase loneliness and depression, especially among young social media users. So for millions of us now, social life seems to consist of peering down into electronic devices and not actually meeting up with people and having the full living, breathing experience, which alone seems to make us more happy. Socializing online may make people feel, paradoxically perhaps, more lonely. Now, Derek had gotten into the habit of scrolling through other people's accounts, looking at other people's images of happiness, of togetherness, of relationships, of friendships, and feeling completely excluded. And of course, that was making him less happy. The feeling that he was missing out on vital human needs that just weren't there for him when he first came along for therapy. Now, some people are more naturally able to make friends, meet people, and maintain friendships, and that's partly down to innate personality differences. But we do know that anybody can learn to be more extrovert, more able to maintain friendships. And of course, not everybody needs as many friends as other people. Some people are very gregarious by nature and they just need more human interaction. And some people need a lot less, but anybody can get lonely. And no matter how introverted a person is, people need people, even if it's just once a week with a meetup for a friend or anything. It gives us nutrition. The human attention factor, the exchange of attention, is a food. And like any food, if we're too starving for it, too desperate for it, then we might just try to greedily claw attention from other people when we have a chance to get it without extending attention back. And that was one of the problems that Derek was having. So as harsh as it seems, we might need firstly to look at what might be putting other people off. Now, this isn't to blame the lonely client. Anybody can become lonely, and that's partly down sometimes to simple circumstances. You go away to university, you change job, you move from one city to another, and you don't know as many people. So your whole life is online, and you might neglect real life communication for online communication. And we know that that can make us more lonely sometimes. So we're not blaming the lonely client, but there might be times or reasons why they're not connecting with other people so well. And we might need to sensitively look at those potential causes. So the point is that making friends isn't always easy. It's not like making a cup of tea, it's a process that needs to roll out over time. And I think it can be especially difficult for people who work in isolating jobs, as Derek did. So let's look at 3 strategies that can help you help your isolated clients to connect with other people. And first off, I want to say that the caveat that it's not that we want our clients not to be themselves. We want them to be authentic. But at the same time, there may be good reasons why they've been putting other people off a little bit. And that might not be the case at all, but we need to check that out whenever somebody complains of being especially isolated or unable to connect with people. So there are broadly 3 main reasons why people struggle to get along with other people, more generally. And number 1, they're aware they upset people, but they simply don't care. Number 2, the person unintentionally offends or puts others off and feels confused when people distance themselves from them. And number 3, they recognize that they put people off, but don't quite understand why, or maybe can't seem to help doing it. Now, Derek really was in category 3. He'd gone along for meetups and kind of sensed that he was putting people off, that he was difficult to be with in some way, but he didn't really quite know why. Now, I suspected that Derek was too desperate to meet friends. So whenever he was in a meetup situation with people, that starvation, that desperation for friendship, for human connection, was actually blocking him from truly connecting. If I hadn't eaten for 2 weeks and I go on a picnic, then I might just grab all the food for myself and even prevent other people from eating on the picnic, which wouldn't be very nice. Sort of grabbing food out of youngsters' hands and scoffing it all in and not letting other people eat because I'm so desperate. And all I can think about is assuaging this lack that I have in me. And it's exactly the same thing with attention from human beings. When you're too desperate, when you're starving for attention, then the normal exchange of attention that needs to happen in a good social situation is blocked from happening. And that's purely understandable. Now, I hoped with Derek that meeting me once a week would give him some of his attention needs. But of course, he needed to meet those needs away from my therapy. So he wasn't just using me as a source of attention, if that makes sense. But he understood this attention factor. It's not if you're starving for something, it's not your fault that when you come across it, you're absolutely ravenous for it. And all you can do is greedily, because it's not really greed, it's desperation, eat that attention that you're getting from other people. But of course, if you're not giving them attention back, then the person can feel almost used. Now, you know what it's like, if you meet up with someone and you just feel like you're an ear, that's all you are for them. And you could be any ear. They're not really seeing you, they're just seeing um, this giant ear that's there purely for them to talk into. Okay, and that's okay sometimes if a friend's been going through a bad patch or something. But if it's always like that, then you start to feel a bit sort of used by the person. You're just, you could be anybody. And I suspected Derek was doing that. So I spoke to him about, the human needs and starvation for attention and so forth. And the way that meeting your needs for enough attention gives you spare capacity to focus on other people so you give attention as well as receive it. So more specifically, I suggested to Derek that people might find other people difficult for one or more of the following reasons. So the person might be demanding, gruff, rude, or overly serious. They might be unremittingly negative. Some people are just negative to be with, sarcastic or cynical about everything. They might be, as I said, prone to talking at people, not with them, permanently set to transmit, but seemingly with no receive button, making other people feel invisible or irrelevant. They might be hard work for others in that they clam up and don't speak or disclose anything about themselves. So they just seem standoffish. Or they might be too obviously desperate to make friends, as I suspected Derek himself was. So those were all the factors that might put people off. And I hypnotized Derek to get him to relax very, very deeply. And during that hypnotic session, I had him observe himself in a recent social interaction so that he could see from the outside what may have been putting people off. And he observed in himself that he was talking a lot, that he had negative facial expressions, that he was being somewhat sarcastic or cynical, but not in a particularly amusing way, and that he was also not giving people much body space. He was leaning in to people, and he observed in that trance state that didn't look right. That kind of looked a bit sort of inappropriate and awkward. So he was learning from himself objectively what he was like in those social situations. And after that visualization, he told me that he looked sour and he was being unduly negative and talking about how bad his life was a lot to other people. And he felt that might have been putting other people off. Now, sometimes it takes an exercise like that for people to actually see what they're like, what they've been doing in a situation, because it's not always obvious to us how we are in social situations in relation to other people. So now we were getting somewhere, and I suggested that there might be more fun, buoyant, relaxed, comfortable, attractive ways of being, which was still part of who he was as a human being. He did have a sense of humor, actually, but it wasn't really coming out in those social situations. So I hypnotized him again, maybe even more deeply this time, and I had him observe himself how he could be in those times, relaxed, fun, interested in other people, but not obsessively so. And he enjoyed watching himself in this new way. So we were building a new template for social interaction. And he was enjoying observing this kind of movie in his mind of him being so much more relaxed, so much more comfortable, and so much more amenable to other people. So step 3 is be a friend to get a friend. Just as success and happiness are byproducts of certain behaviors repeated, certain ways of living, certain efforts and intentions, they're byproducts rather than ends in themselves. Better skin might be a byproduct of regular exercise, but you're not necessarily regularly exercising to start with, at least, just because of how your skin looks. So these things are byproducts. Now, of course, we can't force our friendship on other people, but we can give them something. And what I mean by that is we need to meet some emotional need that they have on some level. If you make them laugh, you're giving them stimulation. If you look out for them, you're making them feel safe and secure. If you encourage them and point out their strengths, you're giving them a sense of status and accomplishment and competence. If you ask their advice, or at the appropriate time and in the right context share intimacies, you're making them feel trusted and connected with you. So we discussed the rules of good listening, how repeating back to someone what they'd told you previously, not in a creepy way, so that, like you've been taking notes all the time, but in a way that powerfully demonstrates that you actually listen to them when they talk to you, can be extremely rapport building. So if you meet them for the first time and they tell you whereabouts they live and that they have this other hobby of windsailing, then a month or 2 months later, you might bring it up and say, oh, you like windsurfing, don't you? I was watching these windsurfs. So you're referring back to the person here and there, what they've already told you. And that can be extremely connecting. So just little sort of hints like that, little tips like that can be very, very powerful for your client. Another tip for good listening is when someone's talking, you're really listening. You're not just thinking about interrupting them, or you're not just thinking about what you're going to say next. You're actually listening. So what you do say next actually relates to what they've been saying. Now, all this can seem very simple, almost patronizing, but we can do it in the right way. We can say, look, some of us all have trouble listening sometimes when we're overexcited or over anxious. And I might even talk about how I get it wrong sometimes. And then we're just delineating good listening practice to our clients. Anyway, I encouraged Derek to get back to the sea swimming group and to see it as an opportunity to enjoy the benefits of sea swimming and the exercise and the daily get together, but without actually trying to make friends. I was emphatic in the idea, in communicating the idea, that making friends should be a byproduct. If they're the right people, then you'll make friends with them. But it should be a byproduct of the activity. And he could focus on the sea swimming. And that, along with the fact that we'd done lots of other work and visualization and relaxation and looked at strategies of how to connect with people better, but also perhaps behaviors to avoid a little bit when we're with other people, meant that he did start to meet people and make friends. He fortuitously realized that there was a guy that he shared lots in common with who lived in an apartment near his, and they started hanging out together. And he became much less starved of attention and therefore less desperate for attention, and therefore found it easier to make friends. So in summary, loneliness is widespread and harmful. Studies show a significant percentage of people in industrialized countries experience loneliness with serious mental and physical consequences. Online socializing is no replacement for real interaction. Strong in-person networks reduce depression, anxiety, and even dementia, while excessive online engagement can worsen loneliness. Some people struggle with making friends due to their social behavior. This is an area where we can make a real difference for our clients. Self-awareness is key to social success. Derek was unintentionally repelling people due to his social habits, complaining too much and not listening. Improving social skills can help. Recognizing and addressing off-putting behaviors such as being overly negative, self-focused, or desperate for attention can make social interactions more enjoyable for both parties. We might use mindfulness training or hypnotic techniques to help our clients develop awareness of where they might be going wrong, and also help them improve their emotional and behavioral patterns. Friendship is about giving, not just getting. People connect with those who fulfill their emotional needs, for example, by making them laugh, offering support, or showing genuine interest in their lives. Activities can be pursued for enjoyment, not just to make friends. Derek resumed sea swimming and, as a result, naturally built friendships over time without desperation because he was doing the activity for its own sake. As we fulfill the need for attention, we develop spare capacity to listen and to think about other things. By reducing his social neediness, Derek became more present and enjoyable to be around, leading to organic social connections. So bit by bit, Derek began to form connections. It was important to understand that you don't just get friendships immediately, that there's a rollout period of increased shared experience and shared intimacies over time. Now, it can be inappropriate to just share your emotional baggage with someone as soon as you meet them. And it may be that there are gender differences between men and women, that generally speaking, that means that men will often do shared activities together and only very rarely exchange emotional concerns or intimacies, whereas perhaps women are more able just to meet up for the sake of just meeting up and share intimacies and so forth, but not necessarily have to do an activity together, if that makes sense. But, shoot me down in flames if that offends your ideology. So bit by bit, the clouds of loneliness cleared for Derek. And one day he said to me that he had a shock, that he woke up in the morning and suddenly felt a weird thing. And I said, what was that weird thing? And he said, happiness. So we can help our disconnected clients connect with people in the real world, not just online. And those are a few ideas. I hope you found them useful. So if you found that useful, then hit like and subscribe. And if you want to know when my next video is out, then hit the notification bell below. I'm Mark Tyrrell of Uncommon Knowledge. And if you want to subscribe to my email newsletter, you can go to unk.com/blog. That's unk.com/blog. And subscribe over there. And thanks for watching.